I built that house with my bare hands and a heart no one ever bothered to hold. The morning light drifted lazily across the wooden floor, painting gold across the pine boards I had laid myself. Lakewood always woke, slow mist curling off the lake's edge, birds reluctant to announce the day. I sipped my coffee by the window, barefoot, wrapped in the quiet that took me years to earn. This house, this space, was mine in every sense. Not just because my name was on the deed, but because no one gave it to me. I scraped it into existence one late night, one extra shift, one buried insult at a time. My phone buzzed against the counter. I let it go once, twice. On the third ring, guilt caught up. I answered. "Hi, Mom. Emily, honey." Her voice always had that veneer like porcelain over jagged glass. "Just calling to say thank you. For helping Lauren. You're so generous." There was a pause. Her words hung in the air like cheap perfume, sweet and confusing. My stomach tensed the way it always did when her praise felt more like bait. "I didn't help Lauren," I said slowly. "Oh well," she chirped quickly, redirecting. "You've always been the practical one. She's just so excited for the wedding." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stared out at the dock, the one I'd sanded and sealed last spring. Each board held a memory, a sacrifice. There was no way they understood what this place meant. To them, it was real estate. To me, it was a lifeline. The call ended with her usual flurry of polite dismissal. "Anyway, love you. We'll see you next month." Yes. Invitations went out. Before I could reply, she'd hung up. An email pinged in. A digital wedding invitation. No personal note. No mention of my name except in the autofill. "Lauren Tran and Adam Sheffield invite you to witness their sacred union." I closed the laptop, annoyed with myself for expecting more. Lauren had always been the chosen one, the bright star, the dainty blonde with the perfect GPA cheerleading ribbons, and a permanent seat at the family table of admiration. I was the one who fixed the garbage disposal when Dad wouldn't, who paid rent on time when they forgot. The independent one, which was code for expendable. I stood and wandered through the house, letting my fingers trace the edges of my hard-won peace. The fireplace I built with reclaimed stone, the beams I saved 6 months to afford. This wasn't just a house. It was proof. Of who I was when no one was looking. Of what I could build without permission. Somewhere behind that silence, a thought gnawed. What did she mean? "Thank you for helping Lauren." I walked back into the kitchen, opened my drawer, and pulled out the folder I kept under lock and key. Mortgage papers, deed. Everything filed properly. All in my name. I flipped through them again, even though I'd read them 100 times. Still, a thin layer of doubt had begun to slide over my certainty. I sat down again, keys in hand. I used to hold them with quiet pride. Now I noticed the weight, as if they belonged to something more fragile than I realized. The call wasn't right. Mom didn't say things without intention, not ever. If she thought I had helped Lauren financially, that meant she believed something had changed. Had it? I tried to push the thought away, but my fingers were already moving. I opened my laptop again, this time typing Windham County property records into the search bar. The site loaded slow, a relic of some outdated government system, but eventually, the form appeared. Owner's name, Emily Tran. Parcel ID autofill. I clicked search. A list loaded. I blinked. There were 2 records. One from 3 years ago when I finalized the deed in my name. And one, more recent. She checks the county property records site on a whim and pauses, confused by what she sees. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together. "Congratulations on the sale," the voice said. I hadn't sold a damn thing. I held the phone to my ear in stunned silence, trying to make sense of the words. I just wanted to confirm that everything went smoothly on your end. The voice continued, male, cheerful, oblivious. Quite the offer. Cash clean paperwork. A rare thing these days. I think you have the wrong person, I said slowly. I haven't sold anything. A pause. This is Emily Tran, correct? Yes. The property at 92 West Shoreline Drive. My hand went cold. I gripped the edge of my desk for balance. That's my house. Another pause, longer this time. Oh. Well. Our records list your name on the seller disclosure forms. You're listed as a trustee under the Tran Family Living Trust. I felt my pulse climbing like a silent alarm. That's not a thing. I didn't sign anything. Let me check, the agent said now, sounding far less enthusiastic. I could hear muffled tapping in the background. The file says the sale was executed through a family trust. Signatures provided by Diane Tran as trustee. The house was deeded into the trust last year. We were told this was part of an internal family agreement. My mouth went dry. Wait, are you saying the house was removed from my name? Transferred to a trust? Yes, ma'am. As of 11 months ago? I couldn't breathe. Who signed that paperwork, I asked. Diane Tran is trustee. And, Emily Tran. Your signatures on the trust transfer documents. No, I said. It's not. There was another uncomfortable pause. Look, I'm not a lawyer. I just manage closings. But you may want to talk to your... I ended the call before he could finish. My fingers moved instinctively, pulling up my bank account. Nothing out of place. No deposit. No lump sum. If $850,000 had just changed hands, it hadn't touched me. Next, the county's property records again. This time, I searched by parcel history. There it was, a quiet deed transfer dated August 14th of last year. Executed under Tran Family Trust, with my name digitally signed. Forgery. It had to be. I stared at the screen, rage wrapped in disbelief. It wasn't the kind that screamed, it sat heavy like a lead weight under my ribs. All I could think about was the echo of my mother's voice. Thank you for helping, Lauren. You're so generous. I tapped her contact. She picked up on the second ring like she'd been expecting me. Emily, you sold my house. She didn't even blink. It was a family transaction, sweetheart. My throat tightened. Without telling me. It's all in the family, she said lightly. Why does it matter whose name is on what? You know you're always welcome to stay with us. You don't even go there that often. That place was mine, I said. I built it. Every nail, every tile, every paycheck. I know, she said. And Lauren's wedding will be beautiful. Flowers from Italy and the venue. Have you seen the venue? She only gets married once, Emily. You'll understand when it's your turn. Something in me shifted, like glass finally cracking under pressure. But I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I watched my reflection in the dark monitor screen and listened to my voice come out cold and steady. So you gave away the one thing I built for her, flowers and fairy lights. There was a beat. Then she chuckled as if I were being dramatic. You can always get another Emily. You're the capable one. Capable. Independent. Disposable. I hung up. The silence in my office felt sharp. I sat back down, opened the bottom drawer of my desk, the one I locked every night, and pulled out the red folder I'd kept untouched for years. The original deed. My deed. I unfolded the papers with a trembling hand. And then I looked. Emily opens her locked drawer and pulls out the original deed. Her name is still on it, or is it? They moved paper behind my back. I was about to turn those pages into blades. The words repeated like a heartbeat in my skull as I sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor of my apartment, documents spread around me like fallen leaves after a storm. Legalese stared back at me, cold, indifferent, inked betrayal. My laptop hummed with the quiet rage I couldn't yet voice, the blue light casting sharp lines across my face. They hadn't just taken the house. They'd twisted law's signatures and trust clauses like a knife. And worst of all, they had done it thinking I wouldn't notice. A steaming mug of untouched tea cooled beside the printer tray, which hissed and groaned as another sheet spat out. I grabbed it before it slid off a trust transfer form dated May 22nd, 2023. Right there, authorized by Daniel Tran. Daniel Tran, my father. Except I knew exactly where he was that week. I'd seen his Facebook photos standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, with his arms slung lazily around Lauren and her fiancé, wineglass in hand. He hadn't been in Vermont. He hadn't even been in the country. And yet, here was his signature stamped and scrawled like he had been across the street with a notary. I pulled the original trust paperwork from the drawer, the one signed when I first bought the lake house. There it was again. But something about the loops in the deed didn't match. The tail in the N was off. I squinted harder, lining both documents side by side. I didn't need to be a forensic handwriting expert. I just needed to be a daughter finally done playing dumb. That's when my phone buzzed. A name I hadn't seen in years lit the screen. Aunt Margaret. They did something similar to your uncle once. I kept records. No greeting, no preamble. Just that. I stared at the message, a strange weight pressing against my ribs. I hadn't spoken to Aunt Margaret since the family reunion 6 years ago, when she left early after a spat with my mother about transparency and the boys getting screwed. I didn't think much of it then. I was too busy trying not to be invisible. Now I wished I had listened. I typed a quick response. What do you mean by similar? What records? 3 dots blinked on the screen. Then her reply came, your grandfather's estate. They funneled funds to pay off Lauren's college loans without telling the rest of us. I kept copies. Come by if you're serious. My throat dried. I was serious. I'd never been more serious in my life. I stared at the spreadsheet on my screen, names of grantors, trustees, notarized dates. All of them should have formed a clean lineage of ownership. Instead, they read like a trail of muddy footprints stomping through my life. By midnight, I had 4 folders open, 3 tabs of Vermont real estate law pulled up, and a yellow highlighter bleeding across clauses I could barely pronounce. Revocable trust power of attorney, fiduciary liability. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew how to read technical documents. I was an engineer. I built bridges with math and muscle. This was just another structure. I'd find the cracks. I printed one page after another, each one landing on the floor with a slap. My apartment, once a minimalist haven, was now a war room. Legal codes on the kitchen counter, deed comparisons on the coffee table, post-it notes crawling up the wall like vines. A sound echoed not from outside, but from memory. My grandfather whispering at a family barbecue years ago, the smoke curling like prophecy around us. This house will be yours one day, Em. Don't let them take it from you. I hadn't understood what he meant back then. Now I did. The next morning, I stood in front of Aunt Margaret's townhouse, still in yesterday's jeans and a hoodie I'd thrown on without thinking. Her place was tucked behind a row of trimmed hedges and faded hydrangeas, a quiet corner of suburbia that always smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. She opened the door with a purse-lipped smile, not quite a welcome, but not a warning either. I thought you might come, she said, stepping aside. They always underestimate the quiet ones. Her dining table was already set, not with food, but files. Manila folders labeled in her neat slanted script. Uncle James's estate, 2012-2014, handwritten notes, photocopies of checks, a flowchart on a yellow legal pad mapping out the family trust. I scanned the documents like a starving woman at a feast. The patterns were familiar: misused trustee authority, undisclosed amendments, emergency decisions cloaked in vague justifications. They use the same language on your grandfather's accounts, Aunt Margaret said, tapping a paragraph. See that In accordance with verbal family consensus. That's legal fog. It means nothing. But they made it sound legitimate, I said, fingers tightening on the folder, because no one questioned them. Well, I would. Back in my apartment that night, I cross-referenced every trust clause I could find. I mapped a timeline. My father had signed the sale transfer on March 3rd, the same week he'd been photographed at a tech summit in Singapore. I had the family group chat selfie to prove it. He hadn't been in the country. And yet, the document had his signature signed in the presence of a notary. Fraud. Plain and simple. I printed it out, circled the date in red ink, and wrote one word in all caps beneath it. Liar. For hours, I sifted through notarization requirements, chain of title laws, and federal trust protocols. Every clause I read felt like a trap they'd laid for someone who wasn't supposed to look too closely. But I wasn't that someone anymore. My highlighter swept over the words revocable by majority trustee authority, only if signed under valid power of attorney. Then I checked the supplementary filings. No POA had ever been notarized. There was no trail, no legal handoff, just one crooked pen stroke. I opened the drawer with the original deed, laid it beside the scanned copy from the county's website. The difference was microscopic, a shifted date, a clause reworded subtly. But the implications, monumental. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a setup. They hadn't just ignored me. They had erased me. The people who raised me, or pretended to, had turned my one untouched space into confetti for Lauren's aisle. And yet I didn't feel rage. I felt something worse: clarity. I messaged Aunt Margaret again. Emily, do you still have copies of the notary logs from 2023? Margaret, I do. Want me to check March 3rd? Emily, yes. I waited, staring at the blinking ellipsis like it was a countdown. Margaret, no, entries under Tran Holdings or Charles Tran that week. I exhaled long and cold. Forgery. Perjury. Possibly even conspiracy to defraud. I wasn't a lawyer, but I had built bridges. I understood structures, how they rose, how they collapsed, how they were quietly sabotaged from the inside out. I closed the file folder and leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of it settle. This isn't personal, I whispered to no one. This is war. I wore their version of me like a borrowed dress. It fit just enough to pass. But it wasn't mine. The sun was too generous that day, bright, blinding, like it wanted to spotlight every crack in the performance I was about to give. I adjusted my sunglasses as I stepped onto the rooftop terrace of the Hayden Hotel, my heels clicking softly against the polished marble. Summer in Manhattan always carried the scent of champagne and ego, and this place was no exception. Emily. Diane's voice floated over the murmur of brunch chatter and clinking silverware. She was already mid-toast, mimosa in hand, glowing like a first lady at a fundraiser. When she spotted me, her smile widened with precision. There you are, sweetheart. We thought you might skip. I returned a polite smile, walked the length of the terrace with deliberate ease, and slipped into the empty seat beside her, the one no one had dared to fill. The outsider's chair. It always was. I'm here, I said evenly. Wouldn't miss it. Roses bloomed along every inch of the railing. The floral arrangements were excessive, delicate, and screaming imported. A string quartet played a saccharine version of Taylor Swift, while servers glided with trays of lobster canapes and sparkling elderflower cocktails. All for a bridal brunch. Not the rehearsal, not the wedding, just the brunch. Across from me, Lauren was radiant in white chiffon, her blonde curls perfectly tousled by what I now assumed was a paid breeze. She laughed loudly and sipped from a custom monogrammed glass. I'm so glad you came, Em, she said, between bites of gold-dusted croissants. I mean, I know bridal things aren't your scene, but this is family. Mom told me you were being super generous. I blinked once. She did. Lauren didn't hear the undercurrent. She never did. Yeah, she said you were chill about everything. I mean, you always were right. Low-key, low maintenance, like that minimalist phase you went through in college. She's always been our quiet achiever. Diane chimed in, patting my hand as if I were a pet that had learned a new trick. Never needed the spotlight. Such a rare trait these days. I smiled thinly. That version of me, the low-maintenance, no-needs, no-drama Emily, was useful. She required no effort, no cost, no consideration. I sipped my mimosa and let them continue the performance. I wasn't here to speak. I was here to listen. The wedding planner approached a lithe woman in a pastel pantsuit who looked like she bled Pinterest boards. "So glad you're here, Emily," she said, with a smooth, practiced tone. "We took a lot of inspiration from the lake house for the decor theme, that rustic chic balance, you know. Clean lines, weathered wood, curated intimacy." I turned to her slowly. "You did." She nodded enthusiastically. "We even color-matched the drapes to those faded dock chairs. You know, the ones you had repainted in that sea glass blue stunning touch." I tilted my head. "Yes, I remember." Diane laughed lightly, sipping her drink. "Well, the lake house had its purpose, didn't it? And now it lives on in spirit at the wedding." I could feel my pulse thrum behind my ribs. They'd stripped my house of everything, even the palette. It was more than theft. It was a repurposing of my soul into centerpieces and champagne buckets. Lauren grinned. "It's like your house, Em, but bigger and more bridal." Everyone laughed. I didn't. I looked down at my glass. Tiny bubbles raced to the surface like secrets eager to escape. The diamond on Lauren's left hand caught the light and flared. "Enjoy it," I murmured, stirring my mimosa without looking up. "While it's still yours." I didn't need someone to fight for me. I needed someone who remembered what fairness used to look like. The subway rattled under the East River like it had something to prove. I sat pressed between a man in paint-stained coveralls and a girl humming through wireless earbuds, the box of documents balanced on my knees. Every bump in the track sent the pages shifting inside records, receipts, and now maybe weapons. Brooklyn came up gray and low-slung as I climbed the stairs into the street. Aunt Margaret's brownstone hadn't changed in decades. It was wedged between two newer, glassy renovations like a stubborn tooth. The iron gate creaked as I pushed it open. Vines curled up the side of the building like they still believed in something. When she opened the door, she looked the same too. Cardigan, slightly oversized hair pinned back in a soft mess, the kind of face that had never needed makeup to be taken seriously. "You brought it all?" she asked. "Everything I have," I said. She stepped aside and I followed the familiar path through the narrow hallway into the living room. Dust floated like memory in the sunbeams cutting across the air. Bookshelves groaned under the weight of law texts and family photo albums. There was a teacup already steaming on the coffee table beside a half-finished crossword. We didn't talk for a while. Just the sounds of paper unfolding, mugs clinking, and the occasional muttered curse from Margaret as she unearthed more of her own boxes. "You always knew something was off," I said finally. "I always knew your parents liked shortcuts," she replied without looking up. "And they liked one child more than the other." She handed me a file, thin-yellowed, the edges brittle like dried leaves. On the cover, in my grandfather's careful pen, it said, "Family Distribution. Handwritten draft. October 1998. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single-page letter. No legal formatting. Just intention, pure and unfiltered. It read, "The lake property shall go to Emily Tran in recognition of her contributions and independence. It is not to be sold or reassigned unless under her explicit direction. We trust this will be respected by the family. William and Carol Tran." My throat tightened. He gave it to me when he sensed what Diane was becoming. Margaret said, quieter now. "Told me, if they ever corner her, give her this." I never thought I'd need to. But here we are. I stared at the handwriting like it was a ghost, like the house itself had spoken through time. This could bring the whole house of cards down, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It won't be enough alone, Margaret warned. It's not a binding will. But it's leverage, especially if you put it in the right hands. I looked at her. And whose hands are those? She took a sip of her tea, set it down, and slid a business card toward me. It read, Nina Calloway-esque. Probate trust and inheritance law. She was your cousin's lawyer when his in-laws tried something similar, Margaret said. Sharp, quiet, dangerous in a courtroom. I took the card and ran my thumb along the edge. You think she'll take the case? You've got receipts, timelines, a motive trail, and now, this. She tapped the handwritten letter. She'll take it, especially if Lauren's name is on the benefit line. We sat in silence for a few minutes longer. I finished my tea. Margaret began folding documents into labeled folders. She'll ask if you're emotionally ready, she said finally. I'm not, I replied, but I'm ready to win. I stood, picked up the box again, heavier now, with something more than paper. By the time I reached the sidewalk, my hands had already pulled out my phone. I found the number Margaret had texted me earlier. Nina Calloway. Emily. I think I need to talk. About fraud. $150,000. Spent like gratitude grows on trees. The steak was overcooked. Lauren liked it that way, dry and curled at the edges, just like her standards. I chewed slowly, nodding along to her monologue about color palettes and the impossible stress of handpicking 200 guests who were all apparently allergic to each other. We were at Delancey and Pine, a French bistro that screamed generational wealth in curated chalkboard menus and $80 oysters. Diane had booked the entire upstairs mezzanine for a private family moment ahead of the final wedding coordination meeting. There was no moment, only performance. Lauren sat at the center of the table, basking in attention like it was natural sunlight. Every word out of her mouth was accepted as gospel. Every joke, even the cruel ones, landed on cue. Of course, Diane said, beaming at the waiter, we're doing a Dom Perignon tower at the reception. Lauren deserves the best. Richard grunted his approval as he tapped something into his phone. The screen lit up briefly, his banking app. I watched quiet and unseen as his thumb slid across the screen and confirmed what looked suspiciously like another wire transfer. The mood around the table was thick with celebration. I smiled and passed the breadbasket. Played my part. Can you believe, Diane said to the wedding planner beside her, the floral wall alone is $20,000, but it'll be worth it. We're even having the caterer design signature cocktails based on the lake house. I blinked. The lake house, I asked, keeping my tone airy. Yes, she said with a little wave. The designer loved the aesthetic Emily's dock chairs, those soft pastels. We figured if we can't have the real thing, we might as well honor it right. Honor it. With drink names and photo backdrops? Lauren smirked. We're calling one of them the Emily, Gin and Indifference. Everyone laughed. I excused myself to the powder room before I forgot how to breathe. Later that night, the house was quieter, only the humming of the dishwasher and the clink of ice settling in my water glass. Diane had left her leather-bound wedding planner open on the kitchen island as if daring me to look. So I did. Inside was the full ledger, expenses, deposits, even a breakdown of who contributed what. One column was marked Family Trust General Use. Another listed itemized charges: $7,800 for invitation engraving, $42,000 for the venue deposit, $18,000 for imported orchids. At the bottom, total family contribution to date $151,430. No signatures, no authorizations, no mention of me. I took photos of every page, careful not to disturb anything. My hand didn't even tremble. Not anymore. Upstairs, I heard Lauren laughing on a call with her maid of honor. Something about custom napkins and a live harpist for the cocktail hour. Back in my room, I opened a message thread with Nina Calloway. Emily. This is where my house went. Yeeking 4 images attached. Ledger book, page 1 JPEG. Ledger book, page 2 JPEG. Wire transfer confirmed. JPEG. Itemized expenses. JPEG. She responded within 20 minutes. Nina, every dollar is traceable. If that trust fund was misused, this gets serious. I'll call you in the morning. Do not confront them yet. Let's document the rest first. I turned off my phone, placed its screen down on the nightstand, and looked out the window. Somewhere out there, people were sleeping peacefully. I wasn't one of them. They thought I was still just the quiet achiever, too low maintenance to notice, too detached to care. They'd forgotten something critical. I build things for a living. I know how to measure. I know how to count. And I know when something doesn't add up. I whispered into the dark, my voice as steady as it had ever been. Let them keep spending. I'm not done counting yet. They played with fireworks. I was burying landmines. The Hamptons estate looked like it had been stolen from a dream someone else paid for. All white latticework and glassy infinity pools rented for a weekend to celebrate the upcoming wedding of the decade, or at least, that's how Diane had described it in the group text. She'd sent me a note separately. We hope you'll come, Emily. Lauren really wants you there. She didn't. But I came anyway. The champagne was already flowing when I arrived late enough to avoid greetings but early enough to watch the show unfold. The backyard was dotted with peonies and chandeliers suspended from tent poles. Everything shimmered with that soft filter sheen of curated luxury. And every detail screamed one thing: expensive. Emily Lauren glided toward me, flawless in designer linen and glistening with curated joy. I thought you weren't coming. I smiled just enough. Surprise. She hugged me like we were the kind of sisters who sent each other playlists and birthday memes. We weren't. She took my wrist gently and clasped something cold and metallic around it, a thin gold bracelet with a dangling charm shaped like an anchor. It's symbolic, she said, grinning, for stability, because you're like the calm one. The condescension was polished, gift-wrapped in civility. Thanks, I said, rotating my wrist slowly, letting the anchor dangle like irony. The toast came next. Richard took the microphone and cleared his throat. The murmurs fell into expectant silence. We're here because of love, of course, but also family generosity. This wedding wasn't built alone. It was built together. Together. Like I'd been invited. Like my house hadn't been stripped for parts to fund this circus. The crowd clapped. Lauren beamed. I stepped away, pretending to check my phone, and that's when I saw her leaning against the far wall camera hanging loose from her shoulder, notebook tucked under her arm. Jenna Quinn. College roommate, former journalism major turned investigative bloodhound. She covered politics now and, occasionally, high society features when her editor wanted real drama in real diamonds. We locked eyes, and she smirked. You clean up well, Emily. You still sneak into rich people's parties for story crumbs? I asked, hugging her briefly. Only when the crumbs smell like lawsuits. I leaned close, lowered my voice. Ever thought of a story where the house wasn't a gift, it was a theft? She paused, lips parting slightly. I'm listening. Back inside, Diane was laughing too loudly, and Lauren posed for endless phone photos. I walked past Richard's briefcase resting near the bar. No one noticed me slip a small, unlabeled USB into the side pocket. It held copies of the falsified trust documents, all carefully flagged not to accuse, not yet, but to bait. A little breadcrumb dropped just close enough to see if he'd take the bite. That night, back in the guest room, I checked my phone. Jenna, if even half of what you told me is true, this story writes itself. And I want it. Emily. Then let's make it count. I'm not just flipping the script, I'm rewriting it. Later, the fireworks began. They exploded in symmetrical bursts above the property, choreographed to a string quartet playing a Coldplay cover. Everyone oohed and awed like children under a 4th of July sky. I raised my glass and stepped outside, standing alone by the pool's edge. The air smelled like smoke and rose water. The anchor charm dangled again as I tilted the champagne flute to my lips. The stars blinked dimly behind the fireworks' glow. And I whispered into the night, soft enough that no one heard, but loud enough for fate to remember to happy endings. Especially the ones they never see coming. They said blood is thicker than water, but ink on paper speaks louder. Brooklyn smelled like dust and rain. The kind of humid quiet that settled after an early summer storm when everything felt too still, as if the city was holding its breath. Nina met me outside the records office, her blazer sharp, her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. She didn't say anything until we stepped into the lobby. "He's alive," she said, pulling out her phone. "Retired. Lives in a rent-controlled walk-up a few blocks from here." I called him. He remembered the name Tran. I felt something shift in my chest, not quite hope, but maybe proximity to it. "You think he'll talk?" He said he might. "Depends on how we ask." We walked in silence toward the address past bodegas and shuttered bookstores, the weight of the folder under my arm getting heavier with each step. Mr. Harold Keller lived on the second floor of a brown brick building with a cracked buzzer and a metal mailbox stuffed with coupon ads. The door creaked open before we knocked. He must have been watching through the peephole. He was smaller than I expected, thin, wiry, with hands that trembled just enough to be noticeable but not weak. He didn't smile, just stepped aside. The apartment was filled with books and the smell of old paper. A cat hissed once and darted under a couch. "I don't do legal advice anymore," he said gruffly, settling into an armchair. "But Nina said this was about Howard Tran." "My grandfather," I said. He looked at me, really looked, and something shifted in his posture. "You have his eyes," he murmured. Softer, though. Nina opened the file and slid the photocopy of the handwritten will across the coffee table. "We're hoping you remember this," she said. "Your signature is here. 1998. Keller adjusted his glasses. The silence stretched. "That was the summer your grandfather stopped speaking to his son," he said finally. "He didn't trust him. Said if push ever came to shove, Richard would sell his own daughter if the price was right." I didn't blink. Keller reached for a pen from a jar filled with mismatched inkless ones and found the one that worked. I didn't think I'd be called to remember this, but I do. I remember Howard's exact words. "If they try to bury her, give her this." He scribbled something on the edge of a legal pad, tore the sheet, and stood. "You'll need this." He handed it to Nina. An affidavit, brief, but clear. Witness testimony verifying the will's authenticity, his signature, and the intent behind it. "Do you still have the original?" Keller asked. I nodded. Margaret did. She kept it safe all these years. She was the only one who listened back then. Nina folded the document carefully and slid it into her case. "This gives us standing. If the house was transferred under a trust that contradicted the will, and this affidavit holds, we have grounds to challenge and potentially reverse everything." Mr. Keller leaned back, eyes tired. "Howard wanted you to know you weren't forgotten." That hit harder than I expected. Outside, the sun was sinking behind the rooftops. The street hummed with soft city noise, a bus breaking a bike chain, clicking, someone yelling over a phone. We walked slowly back toward the train. I hadn't said much since we left. Nina finally broke the silence. "This is it. With Keller's statement, your parents have no legal cover." I stopped walking, feeling the weight of that truth settle into my spine. All this time, I'd been sharpening my blade, but now I had something else. I looked up toward the fading skyline, my voice a quiet promise. "Now I don't just have a sword. I have the shield too. 3 letters, 1 truth, and the end of every lie they ever told." The apartment was silent. No music, no TV, not even the soft hum of the fridge. Just the click of my pen against paper and the steady breath I forced myself to keep. I had imagined this moment a dozen ways, loud, dramatic, cathartic. Instead, it unfolded like a ritual, solemn, deliberate, sacred. The dining table had been cleared except for 3 thick manila envelopes, each one addressed in my cleanest, most unshakable handwriting. One for Richard, one for Diane, one for Lauren. Beside them sat 3 sets of documents, neatly stacked court summons, case numbers, forensic reports, notarized witness statements. It wasn't emotion anymore. It was evidence. And it was irreversible. Nina had called earlier in the day. "They've been submitted," she said. "All 3 defendants will receive notice by 10 a.m. July 15th. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Good. They'll try to delay. Maybe even deny everything. Let them. I hung up after that. No goodbye. I picked up the pen again and reached for the first card, a small ivory square, simple, weighty. I opened it and wrote slowly, each letter etched like a chisel into marble. To Richard. You signed it. You own it. Emily. The ink bled slightly, just enough to make the pressure visible. I folded it and slipped it into the envelope on top of the legal contents. Then the second. To Diane, control doesn't equal ownership. Emily. My hands didn't shake. Not once. And finally, the last. The one I had thought the longest about. I stared at the card for several seconds before I began. To Lauren, I hope the wedding was worth it. Emily. No threat. No insult. Just a mirror. The candle was a last-minute decision. I pulled it from the drawer where I kept things I didn't use anymore. Old cards, dried petals, memories too sharp to touch. It was navy blue, unscented, half-burned from a birthday I barely remembered. I lit it with a single match and set it in the center of the table. The flame danced like it was alive. "This is it," I whispered. There was no one to hear me, and that was the point. I sat for a long time in the stillness, the kind that doesn't offer comfort, only confirmation. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice in the Hollywood sense. It was reckoning. I had been the quiet one, the reliable one, the background figure in everyone else's story. And yet, here I was, writing the final lines to theirs. I leaned forward, eyes on the candle. It's time. 3 envelopes. Stamped. Sealed. Waiting for Judgment Day. They raised their glasses to me, and I raised a mirror to their lies. The ballroom was a fantasy. Crystal chandeliers glistened overhead, their reflections dancing across gold-plated dinnerware and imported linen napkins folded into swans. A live quartet played something soft and classical, and everything smelled like roses, champagne, and wealth. I moved through it like a shadow in silk. Lauren beamed under cascading orchids, her gown floating like spun sugar. Richard clutched his scotch like he owned the world. Diane fluttered about in pearls and powder blue, chiffon cheeks flushed with champagne and self-congratulation. They had turned my house into a wedding theme. My memories had become centerpiece inspiration. The lake house, the one I built from paychecks and drywall and stubbornness, was now reduced to aesthetic. And tonight, they planned to toast me for it. I found my table near the back. Jenna was already there, posing as a lifestyle blogger, her camera disguised in her clutch. She gave me a slight nod, calm, focused. We didn't need to speak. Everything was already in motion. A bell chimed gently over the mic. Diane took the stage, delicate, regal, her voice, the practiced lilt of a woman who'd always been heard. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began. "This day has been magical. And as we celebrate Lauren and Marcus's beginning, I'd like to acknowledge someone who made it all possible." She turned, gesturing to me. "My daughter Emily. So selfless, so generous. She gave us a piece of her heart, her legacy, so Lauren could have hers." Applause rose around me like static. Richard lifted his glass, chuckling. "Not everyone gives away a house at a wedding." Laughter. Glasses clinked. Even Lauren smiled as if my humiliation were a charming family anecdote. I stood slowly, smile calm, posture unshaken, voice clear. Check your mail. That's all I said. Silence rippled outward like a dropped pin in a cathedral. And then, cut to downstairs the mailroom clerk. A man in a navy vest and white gloves placed 3 heavy envelopes into 3 separate hands. Diane's, Richard's, Lauren's. At first confusion, then unfolding, then unraveling. Richard read the fraud accusation with a frozen jaw. His lips moved silently, calculating the implications. Diane's hand trembled as she reached the second page. Her eyes darted across legal terminology she couldn't dismiss with charm. Lauren's phone buzzed. She checked it, frowned, tapped her card again. Declined. Her mouth fell open. Jenna, 2 tables away, was already snapping discreet photos, reaction shots, silent screams, the chaos undercutting couture. She wasn't smiling. She was documenting. Richard called for someone. Diane looked around for me. Lauren's voice cracked. What the hell is this? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The last notes of the quartet's melody faded as I walked slowly, steadily across the marble floor. My heels struck in rhythm, sharp and unbothered. The crowd parted around me, sensing without understanding. I passed Diane, who reached for my arm. I didn't break stride. Richard opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Lauren swore at me, a snarl behind fake lashes. I just kept walking. Emily walks away, heels silent on marble. She doesn't need to look back. She already saw it all coming. They taught me silence. I weaponized it. The article dropped at 6:00 a.m. sharp. By 6:17, the Tran family name was no longer associated with legacy or class, it was now linked to fraud. I sat at my kitchen table, the screen casting soft light across my coffee mug, the headline screaming in bold serif, "Stolen Sanctuary, the lake house that sparked a family lawsuit." By Jenna Vale. Exclusive for the Ledger. The photos were strategic. The lake house at sunrise. A blurred image of legal papers. An old photo of me, hammering drywall, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled. Proof of something no ribbon or money could buy ownership. And betrayal. The story was meticulous public records, trust transactions, even snippets from the affidavits. Jenna hadn't needed embellishment. The truth was damning enough. By 8:00 a.m., the story had over 10,000 shares. By noon, it hit national trending lists under Viewer Lake House scandal. I didn't have to call anyone. They came to me. A former classmate messaged I always knew something was off about Lauren, an ex-coworker from Dad's firm. He's not showing up to the board meeting today. You didn't hear it from me. An anonymous tip. You might want to check Richard's Cayman accounts. He's panicking. By the end of the day, 3 of Richard's clients had terminated their contracts. And Diane, she did what she always did when things unraveled, dressed impeccably, walked in like she owned the place, and demanded answers from people who owed her nothing. She cornered me in my office lobby, all pearls and rage. "Emily," she hissed, brushing past reception. "You could have come to us directly. This is family business." I stood calmly, sliding my phone into my coat pocket. Still not speaking, she snapped. "You think your little war is dignified? You think destroying your sister's wedding was noble?" I didn't flinch. Not once. My silence didn't mean submission anymore. It meant control. "You've humiliated us," she seethed. "Do you have any idea what this looks like?" I stared back, blank and cold. She cracked. "You ruined us." "No," I said, voice low, deliberate. "You did that the moment you signed my name." She froze, a full second of quiet disbelief. Then she turned sharply and stormed out, heels stabbing the marble like accusations. Upstairs, Nina called in. "We've got traction," she said. The judge fast-tracked the hearings. All accounts tied to the Tran family trust are frozen, including the new joint one for Lauren and Marcus. They won't be able to touch a cent. Good. That was quick, I murmured. Not really, she replied. Corruption likes to stay in motion. It collapses the moment it's made to stand still. I ended the call and stepped outside. The city didn't care who was falling apart behind closed doors. It kept buzzing traffic lights, changing shoes, clicking down sidewalks like nothing had shifted. But I had. My silence had become action, and their noise had become consequence. That night, I placed my phone face down on the nightstand. It buzzed twice. Richard Tran calling. I watched the screen glow and pulse. I didn't answer. I didn't listen to the voicemail. I simply blocked the number. Richard tries calling Emily that night. She lets it ring out, then blocks the number. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together. The house fell first, then the lies, then the golden child. Lauren arrived in a soft beige suit and trembling hands. Her usual confidence had been peeled away, replaced by an anxious gloss that no amount of highlighter could hide. The conference room we met in wasn't hostile, but the air was unforgiving. Quiet, air-conditioned, padded chairs and stainless steel coffee dispensers. One empty seat waited between us like a line in the sand. She didn't sit right away, just hovered, twisting her ring, one that cost more than the flooring I'd installed in the lake house by hand. I just want to talk, she said. Nina didn't even glance up from her notes. We're here. Talk. Lauren finally lowered herself into the seat. I didn't know everything. Not like you think. I didn't answer. I wanted her to hear herself uninterrupted. I knew the house was part of the funding, she continued, but Mom said it was in the family, that you were fine with it. I thought, God, Emily, I thought you'd be happy for me. You thought I'd be happy to pay for your champagne wall. My voice didn't rise. Your live violinist, your destination photographer, all of it with the walls I built with my own hands. Lauren flinched. You're twisting this. No, Nina said calmly, pulling a file from her bag. But this might. She laid out a printed email thread. You authorized a $38,000 wire from the Tran Family Holdings Trust for your custom gown on March 3rd. Lauren went pale. Mom told me it was cleared. There was no legal authorization for any of that, Nina said. You signed as a beneficiary, not as a trustee. Lauren opened her mouth, closed it again. The silence that followed was so thick even the lights seemed to dim. I never asked for the house, she said after a long pause. I didn't plan this. I just got caught in it. I leaned forward slowly. Do you remember that winter? The one when Dad told everyone we'd have to cancel Christmas because money was tight. Lauren blinked, thrown. I was 19, I said. I skipped my winter break to finish the insulation myself. That house didn't come from air. It came from cuts and calluses, from skipping dinners, from being left alone with 2x4s and not enough nails. You never said anything, because no one ever asked. Nina glanced at me, but I wasn't done. I needed this out, every word like a board pulled free from a rotten frame. You didn't just steal my house, I said, voice low. You buried me in her walls and called it love. Lauren cracked. Her shoulders folded, inward breath, hitched, mascara smudged. I didn't mean for this to happen, she sobbed. I just wanted one perfect day. I stood up smooth and slow, and I wanted one place in this world where I didn't have to earn my right to exist. No one said anything. Nina collected the papers in slow, steady movements, the kind professionals make when something's finally shifted. Lauren looked up, tears streaking her cheeks, but I didn't offer comfort. There wasn't any left. You should go, I said. Your attorneys will need time. She nodded, unable to meet my eyes, and walked out on trembling heels that echoed down the hall. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. Then I sat back down. Nina slid a cup of water toward me. "You okay, no?" I replied. "But closer than yesterday. They burned the bridge. I learned to swim." It was still early when I stepped into the courthouse, the air already heavy with humidity, and something else finality. I didn't bring anyone with me. I didn't need to. My silence had always been louder than their noise, and today, it would be thunder. Judge Lawson's chambers were cool, sterile. Nina stood beside me, her folder thick with every page we'd bled over the last month. Across the aisle sat my parents, Diane in a too-bright blouse, Richard looking as though he hadn't slept in days. No Lauren. I suspected she'd finally learned that some absences are strategic. I didn't look at them as the hearing began. I looked at the documents. I looked at the affidavits, the email threads, the trust transfer forms with dates that screamed forgery. And I looked at myself not in the mirror, but in the ink that had once stolen everything I built and was now about to return it all. Nina stood presenting our case with the calm of a woman who knew she'd already won. "Your Honor," she said, "the manipulation of this family trust violated both state and federal law. Ms. Tran's property was sold without her knowledge, her signature was falsified, and the funds were misappropriated for private use." Diane stirred her earrings, twitching like they might try to flee the moment. Richard's lips barely moved, but I saw them form the word, mistake. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, calmly. "This wasn't just a betrayal," I said. "This was theft with a smile on it. They called it family. I call it fraud." Judge Lawson asked a few questions. He read through the witness statement from Mr. Keller, reviewed the bank transfers and the copy of the original handwritten will. My grandparents had entrusted to Aunt Margaret, now notarized, authenticated, undeniable. His ruling didn't come with drama, no gavel, no grand speech, just a steady voice reading justice into the room. "Full ownership of the Lakewood property is hereby restored to Ms. Emily Tran," he said. "All remaining assets within the family trust are frozen pending a financial audit. A restitution plan will be drafted. Court is adjourned." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. But I exhaled deep and slow, the breath I'd been holding since the day my mother called me generous with something I never gave. Outside the courthouse, the flashbulbs came alive. Jenna had tipped the press, I assumed. Questions flew like bees, but I walked through them. Margaret was waiting by the stone steps, looking smaller than I remembered, but stronger too. She said nothing. Just reached for my hand, and I let her hold it. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice trembling. "They've done this before, but never to someone who could fight back like you." At 3:00 p.m., I arrived at the real estate office. This time, it wasn't to check records for what had been taken, it was to sign papers for something I was building. My name would be on the project Tran Restoration and Urban Design, a new community green space near Lakewood funded with the first half of the restitution order. They handed me a gold-plated pen. I didn't hesitate. This time, I said as I signed, "I'm building a legacy no one else can forge." The pen clicked. The ink dried. And that was that. She walks out of the courthouse. Reporters follow, but she doesn't stop. Even after silence, echoes linger. The dock creaked beneath me, soft and familiar, like a breath I hadn't exhaled in years. I sat barefoot, toes grazing the lake's surface water, lapping gently against wood that had aged, warped, and held firm through seasons like I had. The sky was still, but something stirred beyond the tree line. A storm was coming, faint thunder rolling in slow waves across the horizon. But for now, the lake held its silence. Behind me, the house stood proud whole. It hadn't changed much. Some shingles needed replacing. The porch light flickered every now and then, but the soul of it, still mine. Finally, legally, irrevocably mine. I brought no phone, no laptop. Just a weathered notebook and a small wooden box I hadn't opened in years. The bench near the dock was my grandparents' favorite. Summers had been marked by lemonade glasses sweating in the heat puzzles that never got finished, and the scent of grilled corn drifting from the porch. I closed my eyes and they were there. My grandfather's arms crossed, nodding slowly while I explained how I'd design the roof. My grandmother humming to herself as she swept the kitchen, always barefoot, always whispering, "Keep what's yours, Em." I reached into my pocket and pulled out an old flip phone, one I hadn't powered on in ages. It hummed to life, sluggish but stubborn. One saved voicemail. One voice I couldn't delete. "Hey, sweet pea. Just thinking of you. You're gonna do amazing things, I know it. But don't forget, okay? Keep what's yours. Never let them rewrite your story." I let the silence stretch after her voice ended. Not out of sadness, but reverence. She knew. Somehow, even then, she knew they'd try. A breeze brushed past, sending ripples across the water and scattering the pages of my journal. I caught them with my palm. On the top sheet, a question I'd written 100 times before. What did it cost? I answered beneath it, a home. A family. Illusions I should have let go of years ago. And then, after a pause, what did it give a voice? A spine. The space to build something honest. The court ruling had restored what was mine, but it hadn't repaired the past. It never could. No ruling would rewrite childhood holidays spent watching someone else unwrap love while I sat quietly in the background. No financial restitution would reclaim the years I spent doubting my worth. But justice didn't always mean restoration. Sometimes it meant closure. I opened the wooden box beside me. Inside, a printed photo of the lake house from the year I finished it, a photocopy of the court decision signed sealed, and the first check I'd received for my new project under Tran Restoration and Urban Design. Proof not of wealth, but of motion. Momentum. A future with my name carved in stone instead of signed away in ink. I dug into the earth beneath the dock, not deep, just enough. The kind of burial that honored rather than erased. The past didn't need to haunt me, but it deserved a resting place. Once the box was in, I covered it gently and pressed the soil flat with both hands. Then I sat back and breathed in the coming storm. A thunderclap echoed across the lake, sharp, commanding a crack in the stillness. I didn't flinch. I'd already weathered worse. I never needed revenge. I needed the truth to speak louder than their lies. The envelope was heavier than it should have been. Not because of what it held, just one folded page, cream-colored handwritten, but because of what it meant, what it ended, what it would never ask for again. My office had changed since the last time I sat here with shaking hands and unsent drafts. The walls were painted now soft gray. There were plants that didn't die, shelves that held more than paperwork. Light poured in, differently, brighter, less filtered by doubt. I uncapped my pen, slow and intentional. The words came easily, but they weren't rushed. Dear Emily, you were right to wait. Right to pause. Right to stay silent long enough to hear the truth beat louder than the noise around you. They called it passivity. But it was patience. And it saved you. Thank you for surviving the years you weren't seen. Thank you for watching, for archiving every wound like evidence until the day came to speak them as facts. You didn't scream. You didn't beg. You let truth become the sharpest sound in the room. And now look, they're gone, and you're still here. Standing. I sealed the letter. No name on the front, just an address, the house where it all started. I knew no one would open it. That wasn't the point. Let the walls hold it like a ghost. Let it settle in the mailbox and weigh a little heavier than junk mail. Let it remind whatever remained that I had indeed found the final word, and it wasn't revenge. It was release. I stood and walked to the filing drawer behind my desktop shelf, center slot, the place I used to keep insurance policies and silent prayers. One tab read, "Victory." I slid the court ruling into place behind it. It made a soft sound, almost a sigh. And that was that. No more letters. No more calls. No more roles to play in a theater of manipulation dressed up as kinship. I paused in front of the mirror before leaving. My hair was different now, shorter, cleaner, like I'd edited myself to match the clarity I'd earned. I looked at my own reflection the way I'd once looked at property blueprints, with scrutiny, with precision. You weren't crazy, I said softly. You were careful, and for the first time I believed it, not just in my head, but in my spine. I locked the office envelope in hand and walked 2 blocks to the post box. The letter slid in without resistance, but with finality. The kind of gesture that doesn't echo, it lands and it ends. On the way back, just outside the building, a woman I hadn't seen before was adjusting a stroller, fumbling with keys. She looked up when she saw me. "You're Emily Tran, right?" she asked. I nodded once, cautious. "I read your story," she said, almost a whisper. "You gave me courage." I smiled but didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Not because I was empty, but because I was finally full.